Buffalo. You're tuned into the Eastside Parkways Coalition Radio Hour, where every Saturday we celebrate, protect, and reimagine the green spaces that connect our neighborhoods and tell our stories. I'm India Walton.
And I'm Candace Moffins. Together, we're hosts, and we're bringing you history, culture, and community every week. Last week, we kicked off our very first talk show talking about why these parkways matter. Today, we're going deeper into their history and legacy. Where did they come from? What did they mean to Buffalo in the past? And how we continue to shape the lives on the east side.
We're joined today by two special guests. Well, what we thought was going to be two special guests. Terry, where you at? So Terry Robinson hopefully will be joining us soon. And as always, we have our resident co-host, Brad Wells, Professor Brad Wells from the UB School of Architecture and Planning, an expert on Buffalo's historic design and Olmsted's vision. Good morning, y'all.
Professor Wells, let's start with you. Buffalo is home to the nation's first coordinated park and parkway system designed by Frederick Law Olmsted. And so, why did Olmsted think that the parkways were so important to a city like Buffalo? And what made the East Side parkways unique compared to the rest of the system?
Well, Olmsted, considered Buffalo would be a city within a park. And it was the first ever fully connected citywide park and parkway system in the history of the United States by who turned out to be the most famous landscape architect of all time. That alone gives us props for wanting to fully restore the system.
Great, thank you. And Terry's not here, but we want to hear from you, listeners. So call us or send us a message. Tell us your earliest memory of the parkways. We'll be sharing your stories. We want to hear you on the radio. If you have a story or a memory to share, call us at 837-1112. That's 837-1112. Now, beyond the spaces, beyond the design, these spaces carry culture. So since we have Miss Grant in the building, another local historian, did y'all know that Miss Grant has written books about how things used to be? So Miss Grant, would you like to share with us a little bit about your memories of the Parkway? You got to come get on the mic.
Oh, okay, gotta get on the mic. Not just Facebook mic, but the WUFO mic, right? Yeah, I just want to say good morning, the community. I'm so happy to be here, to be a part of this Eastside Parkway Coalition. And as you know, we've been meeting for over 2 years, and we're bringing to you stories. And my story is that I didn't live on Humboldt Parkway, but I have a brother-in-law and his family that live on Humboldt Parkway near Brunswick Boulevard. So for me, that means that I am here representing him and his family, and there are some issues of health that I won't go into that they have suffered being on that parkway and part of the expressway. So I know that I came in 1970. They had already removed the trees. They had removed everything. They, in fact, had finished building the expressway. And I remember my first home in Buffalo was on Kensington Avenue near Sisters Hospital. I remember people telling me, well, this house is part of the Humboldt Parkway expansion. When they built the expressway, they removed the houses. At that time, 1970, I couldn't see a house on a truck or a trailer bed being transported across the city because I'm from the South, and that's something that we didn't do down there. We built from the ground up. So I was living in the first house that was moved. I'm not sure if it was the Cherry Street portion of Humboldt Parkway or it was the greater Delvin area, but I know that the house I lived in had been built on Humboldt Parkway. So that's one of the reasons that led me to the meetings. And at the meetings, I found out there were many people like I who were there who didn't know what was going on, even though we knew that there was a group that was representing the community. We knew that DOT was there talking about a tunnel, but we had no information. So I went there, and by being there and seeing so many individuals who did not know enough about the Humboldt Parkway project, I joined the organization. That is the best thing I've done in the last couple of years.
Woo woo! Oh yeah.
So
Say it.
thank you so much for sharing that. And we'd like to welcome into the studio Mr. Terrence Robinson, local historian, environmentalist, preservationist, and all around bad mamma jamma. Good morning, Terry. How are you?
Fine, thank you. True that.
So, my first question for you, Terry, is from your perspective, what stories have been passed down about the early days of the parkways? Because the 33 has been there, since before I was born. So, I don't remember life being any different. So, for the listeners who are a little bit younger than you, and I, tell us about what Humboldt Parkway was like before the creation of the Kensington Expressway.
Well, I can share my experience, which only goes back about 7 decades along there, roughly. And I heard about a lot more, and that was the era really of the African American expansion into that area, which was my grandfather, my father, my family were among the first homeowners in that area. But the area that goes actually from Jefferson to Northland, from Northland to Ferry, and almost to Maine was I won't say predominantly, but it was an area of African American presence in the early 20th century because it was populated by the railroad, what they were called then, railroad men, and folks like that. So that area, Lythe Street, Alexander, et cetera, that's where my dad came from, Cleveland, Ohio, and along Alexander and that was in the mid-30s. So a lot of folks came there during that period when the African-American railroad presence was large because the city of Buffalo was the second largest railroad center in the country. That's why it's the Queen City. And the International Brotherhood of Porters was a significant and very powerful political organization and actually integrated the United States military at that time.
Yeah, because the Pullmans were one of the first unions to actually allow black people to join.
Yeah, and the International Brotherhood of Pullman Porters was A. Philip Randolph and like I say, that's what integrated the United States military during World War II. But that was a section, and that was a section of not yet Humboldt Parkway, but Humboldt Parkway in the post-civil rights era of the mid-'60s was what they used to call the black bourgeoisie. And that was the significant doctors, lawyers, political people, Judy Johnson, Horace Johnson, Barbara Sims, etc., Herbert Bellamy. They were the first to move into that area actually in the mid-'60s or so. And they brought a different dynamic. They brought a different economic status, because when they moved in there, the workers were from Chevy, Bethlehem, and various other industrial, Roswell Park, etc. So actually they had a higher per capita income than the people they displaced at the time. And it was a nurturing but very diverse area of Italians, German Americans, Jewish Americans, in a very dynamic period between that, I would say, 50s and 60s. So that's where I come into the picture, like in 1954, and was baptized at St. Francis de Sales Church there at Northland and Humboldt. And my mother was the first African-American police officer, woman police officer in the city of Buffalo. In fact, there were 6 police women.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, you wasn't around back then. But Commissioner Frank Felicetta actually owned a house at Northland and Humboldt, which he paid in that time, which was significant, going back to what Betty Jean said, $20,000 to move it backward from what was then being displaced as the expressway. But the noise, the traffic, all of that meant that he still couldn't live there, and he left. But the guy who actually designed Buffalo City Hall, Mr. Dito, lived across the street on Humboldt Parkway, 609, and he remained until he went into the nursing homes. So, but that's the guy who actually designed St. Francis de Sales Church, laid the cornerstone in 1927, and actually designed Buffalo City Hall. So there's a lot that was going on in that area during that time. But prior to that, the significance of the Scajaquada Creek is monumental in American history. It's the place where the Hennepin launched his ship. It's the place where, at the foot of Scajaquada, where Perry launched his fleet for the War of 1812. It's where the Battle of Scajaquada Bridge occurred in the early 1800s, which determined the northern border of the United States of America. It's where W.E.B. Du Bois crossed because of the segregation in the city of Buffalo, and the Niagara movement moved to Fort Erie, and where later the NAACP was born, in that union of Jewish Americans and African Americans through the first half of the 20th century occurred. And that's why in 1955 Faith Missionary Church was sold to an African American congregation, and where in 1958 Dr. Martin Luther King actually spoke. So Humboldt Parkway was where the historic Michigan Street Baptist Church congregation moved in 1962. And as we know, as African Americans, the strength of the church is the congregation. And so the congregation was nationally connected during that period of time. And that's why Adam Clayton Powell, Shirley Chisholm, and all the luminaries of the black political movement of the 1960s spoke there and visited there. So it's a historic place, but not only for African Americans, but for European Americans and the French. That's why Beaver Island, where they originally did the fur trapping, and where Philip Conjacity, the last of the neutrals that the Seneca Nation conquered, that's why it's Scajaquada Creek. It's named after Philip Conjacity, the last of those folks. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the Scajaquada Creek, it parallels the Ferry Road. So you know that you could not, as a fugitive slave, walk down the Ferry Road to what's known as Freedom Park. So you had to take the terrestrial, the Scajaquada. And so it's the last sacred 3 miles of that Underground Railroad.
Is that why it's called Ferry?
It's the Ferry Road, and that's where the ferry crossed, at the foot of the Ferry Street.
We're all getting an education this morning, and I pride myself on, like, I know a lot about Buffalo, but this is interesting, right? So I mean, we're getting to a point now where we're not only talking about the health of the community, we're not only talking about economics, we're not like the history and
we're
the
talking
culture.
About the sense of place. That's
sense
why
of
these
place.
children do not have a sense of place, where they come from and where they understand their roots. I'm a 7th generation American.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that means something to me.
That's a lot of history.
I wanna say
You gave us a lot of history.
If you can get a copy of the first journal for Bill when they had the Juneteenth parade, it mentioned Vine Street. Vine Street was an area between Oak and Elm on William Street. It was called Vine Street, right, dearie?
Yeah.
And that was the home. That 2-block radius was the home of all the African American Buffalo.
Not all. Not all.
In the 1840s.
Well, you know, in the 1840s, the population, up until the 30s,
Right.
the so to speak,
Okay,
African American
1840s.
population, no, up until the 1940s, the population, black population, African American population of Buffalo was minuscule, 2-3%.
Right.
It was the Great Migration that sent folks up here from the South first,
Right.
and that 30s and 32 wave and 35, and then they were the workforce
Right.
of the during the $5 billion was spent in defense funds in the city of Buffalo for World War II. So those folks that were populating Bethlehem Steel and Chevy, and that were replacing folks that had gone into the military, etc., that was the demand for the black labor, and that's when it burgeoned, was in the 40s and 50s. My mother was with the 688, and she had gone to Europe and returned, and so it was a very dynamic place for African Americans, largely from Alabama. That's the people I know. There's Robinson County in Alabama, but there's certain, people followed their people, like everybody else. Like the Italians followed their people from a certain district, like the Irish followed their people from a certain district. And when I was a kid, it was still largely a German American city. At the corner of Ferris Street and Main was Maxwell's. Which was, and it was a fabulous, fabulous city. You saw the outflow of that German-American populace in the 60s, which was living the American dream, moving to places where they could not have 3 and 4 families in a house, and they could have a picket fence in the yard. I mean, it wasn't just white flight. It was living the American dream. There was a lot going on.
One time, Buffalo had the second largest population of German Americans behind Chicago, with the second largest population here.
Second largest population of what?
In the country, of German Americans.
Heck yeah!
Chicago,
I mean, this is, man. All of this is German American, largely throughout the 19th century, the 1800s. You had a big influx of Irish Americans in the early 19th century, and you had a pretty significant influx of Italian Americans, and those folks were getting out of Europe because of things that were going on there, and opportunities, in employment here. We had over 500,000 people in the city of Buffalo in 1950, and that's why they were projecting a population of over 1 million, and why they were doing the expressway networks that they thought was going to lead to over 1 million. Instead, it reversed it to under 250,000. Instead of doubling it cut it in half.
And that's a good point that you make, right? Because when we talk about maintaining vehicular capacity as the goal of this project, is a huge misnomer, right? Because it's a city that was designed for 1 million people, and there's less than a quarter of that living here now. And additionally, besides the fact that shouldn't be the objective, right? Since COVID, a lot more people are working from home, right? Every day in the news we say, well, there's fewer people downtown. People are not returning to the office, blah, blah. There's all of these reasons why and how we can just be more visionary and do better. And that's what this is all about.
There's a Facebook question. So, wow, I did not know that about Buffalo. Thank you for the information. So we educate people. Yes. And they say, how can Buffalo return to greatness again?
Buffalo's always been great.
Lord.
Amen.
How can we turn to greater greatness
But let me just put it to you this way. Buffalo has been known and was known as the city of good neighbors. And the foundation of that was good neighborhoods. So you could go to any area of the city, whether it be Italian, Polish, German, the black, or whatever, and at the same time there was a flow. So you could flow. My granddaddy used to walk down Humboldt Parkway to go to the Broadway market. And conversely, people would come back and through and up Jefferson Avenue. Folks from the South towns would drive up Jefferson Avenue because it was the most direct route to other parts of the city and where they worked. Fillmore was the primary corridor. So what you had was a flow. Whether you went to the Little Harlem, whether you went to the Pine Grill, whether you went to the Zanzibar Lounge on Fillmore Avenue and all of the other things that the city flowed. among different things. And there's a one-to-one correlation, almost in my book, between the creation of the 33 and the outflow from the city. But I played football. I was Daryl LaMonica on the Humboldt Parkway.
Who's that?
That's before your time, girl.
The Mad Bomber.
Yeah.
Oakland Raiders quarterback in the 60s.
And Cookie Gilchrist and Jack Kemp and them back in the day. And we used to go to the rock pile to watch. But even before we went to the rock pile, we went to Offerman Stadium, which is where, but that's another story. So it was a place where there was what has been described by Olmsted as the best designed city in the world. The radios were designed in such a way, and the belt line was designed in such a way, and Olmsted overlaid it in such a way so that there was a constant flow and mixture among all. You could live and stay with whoever you wanted to stay and still be a participant in the other cultures and dynamics of the city. That is what can be restored by replacing that best design in the world.
Thank you for that. I love how you brought that round robin all together.
Lived it, baby.
Well, you talked about and gave us a lot of history and insight, but you didn't talk about what it was like for you as a child.
Oh, it was fascinating. You know, I grew up with a variety of people in a dynamic situation like Martin Solster's book Shot Was Down. Folks, it wasn't idyllic America. You know, you understand what I'm saying? The bloodiest confrontation between Americans happened in 1971 at what they called the Attica Rebellion. So, I mean, it was not warm and fuzzy. It was very confrontational. It was very it was, you know, we're talking about a time when there were gas shortages, when the city of New York lost its power, when, you know, I mean, there were, you know, the black disciples, you know, all around, the birth of the Latin kings. So it was a pretty contentious society at the time. But the guy that taught me certain values, hard work, fairness, etc., was Fred Hahn, who owned the corner store at the corner, but his family worked there, etc., etc. I didn't know at the time, but he'd be showing people his tattoo, and I didn't. I was a kid back then, but the tattoo was something that he was tattooed in the concentration camps. But he treated people well. He was a member of the community. There was the guy next door was from Eastern Europe. At the meat market, but the Pickens were across the street. The Garretts had the printing press down the street. That's where the NAACP's office were for decades. And it was a mixed community of everything. I mean, I went to school with Aluzis and Konsikowskis and O'Rourke's. And when I first went to St. Francis de Sales Church, there were probably 3% may have been African American. By the time I left there, I went someplace else, but by the time of my 8th grade, it was probably 80% African American. It was a rapid transition in the demographics of the area. And like I said, it wasn't, when people talk about white flight, there was also a black brain drain over the last 20 or 30 years because of opportunities that were not here or where people went to other places. So, you know, it's a little bit complex. But I grew up with everybody doing doing some things that I had heard about other people doing in that time. And, you know, Humboldt Parkway still existed from 1960 to 1970.
And we're back. And so, Terry, again, I want to thank you for sharing all the history, rich history, and culture and dynamics that were going on. You brought us from, 1840 to 1970 in less than 15 minutes. And so, Professor Wells, how do you see the cultural connection showing up in research? And what's the relationship between these design spaces and lived experiences of the people who've made them their own?
Well, picking up on what Terry said, the Olmsted system was designed as an inherently inclusive system. You could get onto Humboldt Parkway and walk all the way over to museums up to Delaware Park and throughout the east side, like he was explaining. The parkways are linear parks, so you had also in front of everyone's house that was nearby, you had an actual park right in front of your house. And so that was some of the brilliance of the design.
I can't imagine being able to walk out my front door and walk across the street into a green space with trees, and how lovely, how peaceful.
I can. I can. I used to live on Columbus Parkway, and across the street was a park. And some days I would go out there, especially after a particularly stressful day. I would go and I would sit in that little park and just be, right?
Is that by Porter?
It is. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I would like to know. We went from 1840 to 1970, right? I want us to get into a little bit about the future. So if you're listening in and you have something to share, give us a call, 837-1112. We want to hear from you. We want to hear about your memories. We want to hear about your experiences. We want to know if you have any questions that we can answer about what's been going on with East Side Parkways and this whole Kensington Expressway project. And we also want to hear your vision in your mind, in your spirit, and in your heart. What do you want to see for the future of the Humboldt Parkway? So getting into that, Terry, what is your vision for the Humboldt Parkway?
I believe we keep things simple. I think we do the right thing right now, the right way. I think that the current infrastructure has to be removed, whether you kept it, whether you put a tunnel on it, whether you put a bridge on it, whether you removed it completely. It's got to be removed because it's at its life. So you've got to remove the infrastructure, the retaining walls, the bridges, the roadway, all of those things. And keeping it simple would be to act within the current budget. There's been $1.25 billion allocated for the project, for the Kensington Expressway project. That was prior to the scoping process or anything else. So the money has been allocated for the project. So all we're saying is do the project the right way, but we're saying do it right now. And that is begin the removal of the antiquated, the hazardous waste infrastructure. And then we're saying replace it with what is obviously the pinnacle of Frederick Law Olmsted's planning, which was the whole parkway system. This is the only city in the country where it was completely fulfilled at one point. So the restoration of the linear park between Delaware, the Agassiz Circle, and Museum of Science, and then we would sort of extend that to what we call the One Road, which would be from the Museum of Science down to what's the Elm Oak Arterial, would be replacing that grid of the fruit belt, and it would be ideally shovel-ready for affordable housing, for green space, for development of the innovation and medical corridor. And we would also emphasize the restoration of the removal of the 198 Expressway and replacing that with an appropriate corridor through the Delaware Park to 190. And one of the other benefits, there's two other major benefits of it. One would be the restoration of the Skagwada watershed in an appropriate way, and the other would be the benefit that would come to the replacement of the combined sewer overflow. So that's a $1 billion project. They're talking about doing things right now with that would beg to put in the caverns and changed the flow of the overflow in the Scajaquada Creek, if you did not consider the 33 and the 198 as being there, how that would affect the planning for that would be monumental, but it should be. It should be a coordinated environmental look. So we would replace the 198. We would restore Frederick Law Olmsted's historic Humboldt Parkway, and we would also continue the restoration of the one road through the Florida grid, and we would dedicate $500 million of that that's dedicated to this crazy plan to development within what we call the project area. The two, there's two census tracts either side of the Humboldt Parkway between Best and Delaware, where I would say restoration of the historic properties, proper infill, and replacement of the infrastructure should happen. And all of that should happen within 5 years. That should happen by the third anniversary of Buffalo's founding in 2032. So if we begin it, and we begin it now, and we begin it right, we could have it all done.
Is somebody tapping? Oh, it stopped. The tapping was vibrating.
That's me. That's
it was you.
Yeah, I got man. You didn't know?
Can I say something? The question was asked, what can make Buffalo great again? And I know you ladies and gentlemen say that we're always great, always been great.
True.
But we can be greater. And you guys just answered how we can become greater is to remove the 198, to get rid of the expressway, and to fully restore it. I also think that how we become greater too is to have community engagement, to have more people participating. If we look at what happened in the 1960s, civil rights movement, this is a civil rights issue. This is a civil rights issue. Civil rights movement did not start. It started with 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 individuals, but it grew to be a symbol of people working together to change the system. And so we need that in Buffalo. We need to have more community engagement. We can't expect the Eastside Parkway Coalition of a couple hundred individuals to be effective when we have hundreds of people, 100,000 people in Buffalo who need to get engaged and need to be involved. So how we become greater for my Facebook people who are watching is we can get more community involvement. We can do that, start that by calling this radio show, 837-1112, and we can become more engaged, and we can participate, and we can support. We also can find out the correct information. There's a lot of misinformation that's out there that can be refuted by a simple phone call to our co-founders, Candace Sherelle Moppins, and Brad Wells, and our host, Miss India Walton, who knows everything, and Mr. Terry Robinson, who knows as much.
We got a fresh moment in time, Betty Jean. I mean, this is a whole new start. The EIS is a brand new start, supposed to start from scratch. If the entire city gets behind the full restoration of Humboldt Parkway, yes, like we're hoping that they will, because it's the best, least expensive, fastest, most healthy, most historically appropriate plan. If the whole city gets involved and say, hey, we want that back, I say we're going to get it. That includes everybody on the east side, all the people stretching out down towards the Niagara River. We want back our heritage here in the city. And by the way, Terry, you say 5 years for it, and this is to anyone else out there who thinks it might be a long time to be able to get that done. I got it at 6 years. 6 years to a full restoration. That's 2 for the CIS process, 1 for some construction documents, some drawings for the full restorations, and 3 years construction. Because it's less time in construction if you don't have to build all those rebuild all those new retaining walls. We could do this in 6 years.
And what gives you the authority to make those estimations, Professor Wells?
I have absolutely no authority whatsoever. On the other hand, I do have 40 years of experience as an architect, and you could go on our website and see how much work it takes to tear down and completely rebuild those walls compared to just cutting them down about 8 feet and filling it in and getting right back to the full restoration.
And that website is www.eastsideparkwayscoalition.com.
We have a caller. Good afternoon, caller. Good afternoon, caller.
Hello,
Hello. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Do you have a question or comment, sir?
A question, please. True or false? Does the previous work and time spent by the New York State Department of Transportation to produce their choice of retaining the expressway under a partial cap of green space give it any official advantage in evaluating options to the EIS process?
Well, thanks for that, because it is an issue that people want to know about. Absolutely not. We are at a complete fresh start right now. The DOT is required to start with a public involvement plan, a PIP, and there's regulations for that. There's a public involvement manual. If you go on the FHWA website, Federal Highway Administration, you can find that manual, and it states that the process for getting people involved should be inclusive rather than exclusive. If you even perceive, this is a quote from that manual, if you even perceive that you are a stakeholder or have an interest in this, you may demand to get involved because you are a stakeholder. And again, that's not my opinion. That's right from the FWHA through to the New York State DOT's document on their website.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
There is a project development manual by the New York State Department of Transportation that details the approach they're supposed to take, etc. Now, this whole process, actually, we're going to insist, I'm going to insist, because I have different priorities sometimes than others, on a immediate, let's just say the project has been in existence since at least as 5512.52, the New York State Department of Transportation designation for the project identification number, for 15 years. So this is not a new project. We don't know that, and if it's done correctly, that the feds will even be involved in the project. The money that has been allocated largely by New York State in its 22-23 capital improvement budget for the New York State Department of Transportation. That's $1.25 billion. $55 million of it only came into, they were hoping to get a reimbursement from the feds for 80% of the program. But the feds are not necessarily even a part of the project. What is the project right now is the New York State Department of Transportation Kensington Expressway project. And then they make provisions for whether that is 100% state funded or whether there is a collaboration with the feds. Regardless, the judge said they must act in accordance with the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act, SEQR. And if they act in accordance with SEQR, and it is a Type 1 project, the overlay of how that is done and what the mandates are is very clear. And if you look at it in terms of their project development manual, it's very clear.
All right, there's another caller.
Yes. Hi.
Hi, good morning. Well, afternoon.
Good morning. Good afternoon. I want to say thank you to all of you. You know, there's a lot of injustice and discrimination that has happened to our people, and we need voices and more voices like yourselves to make a difference, to take a stand. And a lot of times people don't or are not aware of what's going on. So I want to say thank you. And I support you of full restoration of Humboldt Park, meaning the dirt, okay, and not a tunnel. And so, again, I applaud you all. Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you so much.
much.
Yeah, it's courage does not come without consequence, right? And we know that there have been some super powerful people engaged in this work who, like I said last week, they've done a great job of laying the foundation. And to Terry's point, this project was named 15 years ago. And knowing what we know today, we don't have to choose what was decided 15 years ago. This is about environmental, racial, economic justice. We know so much more today than we did 15 years ago. And it's okay to say we didn't choose the best thing and let's figure something out. So, this is, again, an invitation to people who have opposing viewpoints for us to come together and come to an understanding. Let's not be so focused on what separates us, but let's focus on what brings us together, because ultimately what we all want is what's best for our community and what's best for Buffalo, and we can have that, but we cannot have that separated.
Back in 2009, when DOT told the community it was going to be a cap that would perpetuate the expressway, a cap back in those days, that was pretty cutting edge. I mean, that was the thing countrywide. But nowadays, the new norm in New York State is highway removal. We got that in Niagara Falls, Syracuse, Rochester, and planned for Albany, and also planned for the 198 on the west side. So why not for the east side, too?
And what is this American, the term expressway just is cringy to me, because what is our obsession with express? Can't we slow down? Can't we enjoy life in the time, in the sunshine, in the few extra moments of a commute? I would much rather be able to traverse the land safely and peacefully than in a hurry.
I think Buffalo is the only place left in the United States of America that it takes 15 minutes to get anywhere.
Absolutely, which is fantastic.
We've been spoiled.
Right.
by the as India said, the expressway. When I go and visit my girlfriends who have moved to other places in the country, I'm in that rental car for an hour and a half driving to where they live, and I come back to Buffalo and I'm like, gosh, it's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Everything's 15 minutes.
It still is. It still will be with the removal of that expressway because of the radio design and everything else. This is a one-off. Despite all of the removals and this, it is the only city in the world that has that Frederick Law Olmsted design. There is no other replacement in all of America. This is a unique opportunity to restore not only a landscape, but a design treasure that exists nowhere else. We're unique. And even though it may take, we have all of those existing rail rights of way. The Beltline, like I say, we were the second largest railroad. We can have a high-speed rail to move those 6 million visitors from Niagara Falls to the downtown Buffalo in 10, 15 minutes if we, and there's no need to acquire rail rights of way, all of those sort of things. It should all be, we should be designing for the next 20 to 50 years instead of, that's the legacy of Robert Moses, the power broker. And that legacy still continues in the New York State Department of Transportation and their mindset where they're too big to fail, where they override the local considerations. That has to be displaced and eliminated once and for all. If we design things and do things for the good of the future and the good of our population, of course, we might have to design something new. There might have to be a side route, a protected barrier there for the electric scooters and bicycles and other things. I mean, we are living in another world than we did 100 years ago. So you have to take into consideration those sort of things and do it in a smart way, do it in an intelligent way. Replace your infrastructure underneath those 100-year-old sewers, cables, type, and do it so that they're smart streets. They're talking, even when I look at their design, they propose a doubling to 10,000 vehicles on Humboldt Parkway in front of my house every day with the tunnel. The tunnel, the only people excluded from getting on the tunnel are the people in those four disadvantaged areas that are adjacent to it.
Say that again. Wait. Say that again.
Well, it's a bloody tunnel. You can only go in at certain ends of it. So that the only people excluded from going onto the expressway would be the people that host the construction of the thing for the next 5 years. It's ridiculous.
It's not in your best interest.
Those streets will be blocked off.
There's no entrance. The only entrance and the feed for the areas adjacent to it in the project area within the between Best and Delavan and Fillmore and Jefferson Avenue, you'd have to go down to Best Street, or you'd have to go down to, I don't know, presumably Delavan or whatever they've got in mind for getting on it. But you could not get access to the 33 with this design as it's been designed. The only people excluded from it are the people that supposedly it's reconnected.
And that sounds to me like the priority is not the people who live there, it's the people who want to get through there very quickly.
Well,
and
that's
it's
not true.
And it's not that.
That's not
quick
true
anyway.
Because the majority of the traffic, when you talk about those 70,000 trips a day, I can guarantee you for a lot of the time, 10 of them were mine. Whether I got, you know what I mean? Whether I got on and shot downtown or shot up to Grider or got off at Bailey, 80% of the traffic was and will remain local. It is local traffic. It won't be coming from all of that mythology of the 3,000 jobs at Trico are gone. The stamping plant is gone. Bethlehem Steel is gone. Downtown, that's not the traffic that maybe 2%, 3% of the traffic goes from the airport to downtown. What happens is that all of those accidents at Humboldt and Utica and Parkside happen because the traffic is canalized into that limited space. It would reduce the fatalities on the one-way things along the 33. It would be a benefit on every level.
We got to have a traffic show because Buffalo is too small of a city to have two expressways coming in from the east. And I heard that directly from a DOT employee who just said it flat out. We could get rid of that 33 right now. And with the 1804 Ellicott radial plan, you'd still be able to get around the city in 15 and a half minutes.
And I have a suggestion for that other half minute, like find yourself a nice podcast. Your commute can be a time for self-improvement and self-reflection,
Huh? Oh.
Yeah. Listen to an audiobook.
You mean listen, not conduct one.
Not host a podcast. Listen to one.
That's why you had a butcher, baker, candlestick maker, a florist, et cetera, at every stop, because you could stop and like you mentioned, the rhythm of how you live and drive, et cetera. It would be a plus.
So there's a question about radio. What is radio?
See.
The radial streets were set up by Joseph Ellicott in 1804, and actually the Olmsted system got overlaid on top of that. Olmsted said it was the best designed city in the world, and those radials include Genesee, Broadway, Walden to Sycamore, Clinton, William, all the way down to Seneca, and you could even include the Kensington Boulevard.
So you mean radials, you're talking about streets. So the radials are the streets.
In a radial design. The same design, in fact, Ellicott's brother laid out Washington, D.C. So that concept of like the spoke of a wheel and you could get out to everywhere and reach every segment is what was both unified. And then Olmsted studied it and in London and in Paris, the Champs-Élysées, the great boulevards of Europe at the time when those cities were million-plus people cities. And he developed his concept based on his observations everywhere else, and he came up with a brilliant design. That is why we are the best designed city in the world.
Whose quote is it that Humboldt Parkway was the grandest boulevard in the world, grander even than the Champs-Élysées?
There were a few people that observed it, including de Tocqueville, et cetera, at the time. But the concept of Buffalo at that time, when it was a burgeoning a city and among the foremost in America, it was universally acclaimed as, because when I was a kid, back in the day, it looked like a forest from the air. It wasn't just the streets. It was the foliage. It was the trees. It was the whole ambience of the place came together in a way that was elegant and natural and compatible, so that you could walk any person in the city, no matter how urban their environment, no matter how desperate it was, they could find rest. You could take them little bad kids down the street 10 minutes and let them run themselves ragged. I know, because my cousins were bad.
All right.
Terry, what gives you hope when you think about the next generation of Parkway users?
We're going to win, number one. Number two, when you talk to these young people and you feel their brilliance and energy and passion, that is the next generation. We're played out. You know what I'm saying? And so when we bring on that next generation to plan in a sustainable, comprehensive, holistic way, you're never going to get 100%. I remember as a young black man, black people calling Martin Luther King a communist. I remember when Malcolm X was in front of his window, by any means necessary, and that's not who took him out. You have to understand that there is never going to be unanimity in any community, and particularly there are people that have legitimate opposing. My father loved the 33. Faster, cheaper, quicker. But when that came in, when the expressways were invented in Long Island and et cetera by Robert Moses, and he was the park chairman of Long Island at the time, all of those things have changed. And so, and back then, women could not drive. It wasn't that minorities were in. Vehicles were a symbol of power, of American might, of modern thinking, of the white American male at the time. So it was not a universal type of acquisition. I mean, people, even when I was a kid, you'd have 2 or 3 families that would go shopping together at the end of the week. It wasn't a 2 and 3 car and moving living room family. It was, you shared. It was a whole different mindset, so that faster, modern, new America thing in the mid 40s and 50s was very, well, I won't go into that right now, but it's a different time, it's a different place, and those folks were not necessarily wrong in trying to move 3 and 4 people out of a flat so that they could have a place to live, but it resulted in the strip malls and the whole mindset of suburbia.
Mm-hmm.
2 minutes?
2 minutes. Well, Terry and Brad, thank you so much for joining us today. And Mrs. Grant, thank you, as always, for being here. You've shown us how our parkways are not just roads with trees, but cultural treasures, living history, and spaces worth fighting for.
And to our listeners, don't just listen. Get involved. Speak your truth. Join us at our Eastside Parkways meetings on the first Thursdays at St. Philip's Episcopal Church on
15 Fernhill.
15 Fernhill, and on the third Thursdays at the Delavan Grider Community Center at 5:30 p.m. You can also find us at our by visiting our website at www.eastsideparkwayscoalition.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We want you to volunteer. We want you to share your stories. And we want you, most importantly, to be a part of this movement to restore and reimagine the spaces in the community.
And
Next Saturday, August 30th, our theme is Green Space and Climate. We'll dive into how the parkways protect us from heat, flooding, and more, and how you can join efforts to expand the tree canopy.
You've been listening to the Eastside Parkways Coalition radio show with India Walton and Candace Muffins. Thank you for our guests, and thank you for community for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Yeah.